What's going on, everybody? I'm Brandon from Walker's Woodworks. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over some commonly made mistakes that you make, especially when you're first starting out, or I still make them too, when you first bring the lumber into the shop and start cutting it up for your project. So hopefully I can help you avoid some of those. Let's get started. Race car. Are you done? Thanks. Most of the stuff I'm going to be going over today is going to be on the miter saw, but this basically pertains to any saw you mill down wood with. In my opinion, the most important thing before every project is to make sure your equipment is square. Not just your saw, I mean everything. Joiner, bandsaw, table saw, all the saws for sure. Drill press? You never know if you turn the table or somebody maybe you bumped into it, came in your shop while you weren't there and used your tools. Who knows? Maybe you moved it and forgot. Might as well start square, right? So we're going to check the square on this just to make sure. All right, so the first thing you're gonna do when checking for square is grab a good square that you know is square. I'll leave a link to this one because I really like it. It's like the perfect size for this in the description below for you guys to check out. I always check the back fence just to make sure it's always square. It can't really vary. But most miter saws have a lock, so when you put it down, lock it down. It's for portability, but it's nice for this too. Get the blade guard up out of the way as much as you can, and then when you put this in here, you want to make sure that it's not up against a tooth or hitting the arbor nut. You want to make sure it's flat on the blade and flat on the bed. See? I don't know if you guys can see that, but it is out just a hair. So I'm going to adjust that, if I can remember how. Oh, way too much. You also want to make sure your bed's clean. You're not setting it on a piece of wood or anything like that. Is that good? That looks kind of good. Don't always trust these markers because they get bumped and moved, even if you set them up. Just takes a couple seconds just to make sure you're square. You know, makes the whole project a lot easier. I figured while I'm at it, I'll show you guys how to do the table saw as well. Same process. I actually just cut some 45s on mine, so I need to put it back to 90. So a couple ways you can do it on the table saw. So you can do the same square setup. With this, you really have to make sure you don't get it on a tooth. That looks real close. But if you want to get real fancy, get yourself one of these digital angle finders. They're 30 bucks on Amazon, whatever. Set it on your bed, zero it out, and then you put that on your blade. Yeah, see, it was a little bit off, so fairly close. You can fine tune it with this on there. Wrong way. It's real touchy. You know, 89.9 that's close enough. But if you're like me, you want to make sure it's 90 for some reason. Anyway, there you go, 90. So there you go. First mistake a lot of beginners make is not checking for square. I mean, I still do it sometimes. I really try to make sure that I check for square every time before starting a project, but you get in a hurry, things happen, and once you get done, you're like, oh, I forgot I set that to a 5-degree bevel or 10-degree bevel, and then all your cuts are off and you got to make your whole project smaller. So second thing is when you get lumber, it always has a factory cut edge. A lot of them are painted like this here, but some of them aren't. But anyway, when you start your cuts, I always like to cut off that factory edge, and because you squared your saw, you know that that first cut is square, and then when you measure from that, everything else is going to be square too. So let's go ahead and cut this off. Now that you got that factory in cut off, you know it's square to the back and you can move on with your project with confidence. Also, this applies to plywood or any wood, basically. You want to start off by cutting off a factory edge and measuring off that when you're cutting up your sheet goods, because most times the plywood is not exactly square with the ends inside, and you get what I'm trying to say. Something else a lot of people do when they first start out, I know I did, is trying to be proficient when you cut. So you say, oh, I need 3 12-inch pieces, right? So a lot of times people go through and say, okay, I got 12 inches here, 12 inches here, and 12 inches here, whatever. So now I got 3 12-inch pieces, right? Well, not necessarily, because the blade width is not taken into account when doing this. So the best way that I know of to make repetitive cuts is cut your first one, don't mark anything else, put your pencil away, put your tape away. Use this piece and don't put your pencil away, you're gonna need that. use this piece, put it on here, line it up with the edge, and then mark that. Cut that, use that first piece, go over here, mark that. What you don't want to do is use this piece, cut here, and then use this piece, cut here, use this piece, cut here, because sometimes you're off just a hair, and by the time you get to the end, especially if you made that mistake on each piece, sequentially it's going to add up and you're going to be a 1/16 or a 1/4 inch off from what you started with. So always use that first piece as your measuring stick. Also, another tip while we're here with the tape measure in hand, make sure you use the same tape or ruler or whatever throughout your whole project, because these little pins right here, they wear out from people doing this over and over. So I actually did this the other day. One of my tape measures was like a 32nd different than this one, which is brand new because these are a lot tighter than that one. If you guys don't know what this does, basically you hook it on here and that gives you your measurement, but that little play, depending on the tape measure, will make up for the thickness of this tab. So when you put it up against something, it pushes that play in, and that'll leave you with the same measurement as it would if you were pulling on it, because it pulls that distance away as well. Just a tape measure trick. Oh, also, most tape measures have a measurement right here that tells you how long they are. So technically you could say, oh, it's 10 and, what's this one? 3 3/16. That's pretty right on. 10, 13 3/16 would be marked back here. I don't like to do that because it's not really a good reference of here, so I just go off the tape, but it's there. Real quick, kind of adding on to what we were just talking about, using that first piece to make the rest of your measurements. I wouldn't go and get a project, get some plans, get the cut list, and cut all your pieces at once. I wouldn't recommend doing that. Not because I've made that mistake before. It's just sometimes it doesn't work out. A lot of woodworkers do what they call relative measurements as you go. So you'll start off with your first piece, second piece, third piece, whatever, make a drawer. Oops, your drawer's off by a 1/4 inch. Well, you can adjust the rest of your project rather than redoing that drawer to fit that. And most of the time, it's not enough to make a huge difference unless it's like a built-in maybe, but even that can be scribed in or photoed in or whatever. So that's a good tip as well. Don't cut all your pieces at once. This kind of touches back on the blade curve for moving material situation. Say you want to cut a piece that's, well, hang on to the pencil. Geez. Cut a piece that's 12 inches and make sure it's square, so you use your square. A lot of times what will happen is people will cut right on the line, and that will take off, a 1/16 on each side of the line. You got to determine which side's your waist side. Typically, I put an X. So this side's your waist side, and that's the side the blade needs to go on, and you want to line the edge of the blade up with your line. I like to use a fine tip pencil because it's a lot less room for error, but if you use something like a carpenter pencil, even if you use the edge, you can see how much thicker that is than that. I mean, it's not a lot. If you're doing fine woodworking though, that little bit added up over time may cause you some issue. But either way, you want to make sure you know which side of the board is the waist side, and also not to cut on the line because you'll end up with a shorter piece than you actually wanted. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about is tear out. If you don't know what tear out is, it's basically this right here. See how the wood is tearing out? Now, a lot of times it's not too bad, especially with hardwoods. Like this is birch, it doesn't do it too bad, but with pine or fir, a lot of the woods you're going to start out using, cedar, redwood, stuff like that. Even some hardwoods like purple heart or hickory does it real bad. Oak a lot of times. Anyway, there's a way to get around this, a couple ways actually, and I'll show you them right now. Now, a couple things that you can do to prevent that without even doing anything to the wood is make sure you have a good quality blade that's sharp, make sure it's not dirty or gummed up with pitch, and also make sure you're using the right blade for the job. So when you're cross-cutting, you want a fine-tooth blade, like this is a 10-inch blade and it's a 60-tooth. So there's a lot more teeth than, say, a combination blade, which would be like a 40-tooth, or a ripping blade, which is 24-tooth. Now, if you're framing and you don't care about tear out, those guys use like a 24-tooth blade just to get through and get done, and they want to move on with life. But if you're doing like the hardwoods and stuff, you don't want to get tear out, fine-tooth blade is key for sure. But sometimes tear out's just unavoidable, and what you can do to remedy it is use blue tape. Let me show you what I mean. All right, so say we want to make that same 12-inch cut and go out, kind of mark approximately where it's going to be. It doesn't have to be exact. But then what you want to do is determine which side's going to be against the fence and which side's going to be on the bed. And you could wrap it around the whole thing if you want. I guess we'll do that. We'll wrap it around the whole thing. Basically, you want to kind of center up where that's going to be. Take your painter's tape and wrap it around the board. Now this is really only if you're getting like severe tear out. It's going to take forever if you want to do this on every cut of the project, but it is a good way to prevent it. So figured I'd show you guys. Then you can make your mark it on there just to make it easier to see. And now we can take it over to the miter saw and see how it does. There's that. I'm going to cut another one just to show it against it. Oh, angry vacuum. So let's peel our tape off. You can see it left just a little burr, but once you wipe that off, you don't see any marks. And this is the side that did not have the tape. Much more tear out. Like I said, with this wood, it doesn't tear out too bad, but if you're using something like pine, it tears out pretty bad. So that's another tip. This works really well on plywood. Plywood's another wood that chips out pretty bad, especially if it's a lower quality plywood. You want to put the tape on the side that the blade's going. So if you're using a circular saw to cut across the top, you want to put the tape across the top. Same with the jigsaw, across the top. Or if you're putting it on a table saw, put the tape on the bottom side, because whichever way the blade is turning into the wood and exiting with your cutting edge, that's the side that's going to be having the tear out. So put it on that side. I hope this video helps you guys out, maybe helps you avoid some mistakes I made when I first started and, still make today. But more than that, I hope it helps you guys get out in the shop, be more confident, and make some awesome stuff. If you guys like this kind of video, I got another one queued up for you right there. Please check that one out. Also, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Like, share, subscribe. You know the deal. I appreciate you guys' support so much, and we will see you on the next one.